Three critical questions, strategic thinking for struggling businesses. Welcome to IO Insolvency Options with Darren Vardy, the Managing Director of Insolvency Options and a registered liquidator with over 30 years of experience helping businesses and individuals navigate financial challenges. In today's episode, Darren reveals the three critical questions he asks every business owner. Why are you here? What would you like the outcome to be? And how are you going to get there? He explains why understanding the root cause is more complex than it seems, how to balance optimism with reality when setting goals, and why commitment and working capital are essential for any turnaround. You'll learn about the 50-50 split between restructure and closure, and why sometimes the best outcome is a clean exit. I'm your co-host Anthony Pearl. Let's dive into unlocking more about insolvency options. Darren, I want to pinpoint three particular questions that I think people should be asking themselves why they're ending up in a situation where they're talking to you. What are those three kind of questions or stages?
Whenever I engage with directors or their advisors, there's probably three key questions that I sort of ask. First question is, why are we here? What is the reason? Has there been any event which has put you in this financial position, as opposed to just simply trading at a loss for a couple of years at once? The second question is, in an ideal world, what would you like to see the outcome to be? And then we can explore what needs to be done to achieve that outcome. So for instance, if a director said, look, I want to give it a real good shot at turning this business around. There's been an event that's happened, but it's an isolated event. Yes, we've taken a hit on the assets, but the business can trade profitably if we were to restructure a few things. Well, then we look at the options on what that restructure looks like. And you know that the stakeholder has the energy to invest into it, because one of the things with any turnaround or restructure, it takes time and energy. And so whenever we go into this, I always like to make sure that the directors are fully committed. You know, the old saying is that, I want to do this, but I'm not going to commit to it. You can't be half pregnant. So it's all about, if I'm in, and we're going to give it a red hot shot to turn this thing around. Because if we don't have the commitment of the director and the shareholder, and we don't have the wherewithal, say the working capital required, any turnaround just won't be successful. The corollary to that is, we've had people come through my door where they've said, look, we've struggled for years and years and we're just done. We're drained. The business has taken an emotional and a physical toll on me. I'm just going to get out and go and get a job. Now, that option's easy. That option is, well, look, hey, let's just wind up the company. Can we sell the business as a going concern? Yes, no. If yes, great. If no, default position is we realise the assets, creditors get paid what they get paid out of the sale of the assets after costs, and everybody moves on. So really that question of what do you want to achieve in an ideal world out of this is really important. And off the back of that is, how. It's the how. How are we going to get there? And as I indicated earlier, based on what their desire is or what they would like to see as an outcome, that's when we strategize, plan to determine if that outcome can in fact be achieved.
Yeah, because essentially, I guess it's a big hit to people when you get involved in a business mentally as much as anything else. So do they feel like they have the answers?
The individuals and the directors don't have the answers, and which is one of the reasons why they come and seek advice from me. What I can provide is clarity of situation and options, and that's what we do. And then that allows them to go away and think with a clear mind, hey, here are my options. This is what I need to do to achieve those options. And do we have the wherewithal to be able to achieve that? So they can make an educated decision on what does the future look like based upon the various scenarios available to them with their individual circumstances.
Let's go back to the first question, because I think this is where, obviously it's where it starts, but it's a difficult question to answer. And for people, I imagine, why are you here? Because many of them may not know, really. They know that they've been given a reality check and they've probably been told to speak to you, but the why is a deeper question, right? It's how did they get to that point?
Yeah. And, that's where I ask for, before we have that initial meeting, I have them send over their financials and some financial information so I can have a look at, just to try and pinpoint what I see as some of those warning signs, to educate them as part of the process, to say, well, hey, you tell me why you're here and I'll tell you why I think you're here. And between that, we can work out, educate them on the things they don't know, but also educate them on, okay, moving into that next two questions, which is, what's your ideal outcome and how are we going to get there? Because quite often you may have, or I may have, the conversation about what I see. And as a result of that, they turn around and say, hey, this is going to be too hard. We're facing a mountain that we're never going to be able to climb over. Alternatively, and I have had this where people have come in and our accountant said we need options. People say, just liquidate. And I say, well, hold on, let's just see what we've got here. And it's like, well, hold on, you actually got a good little business. It may well be better with some restructure or pivoting in certain areas. You can get it back to a profitable state. And here is a pathway to do that. And they were comfortable with executing that plan and following that pathway. So it actually gave them, I guess, a solution or an option that they didn't think they had in the past, to then achieve a very different outcome that didn't exist before they walked through the doors.
I think it's an important point for people to understand, isn't it? When they come to deal with you, well, one, it will be dependent on what point they're getting the advice from you, right? It's either whether it's, kind of on death doors for the business, or whether it's, hang on, we think we're going in a direction that's not great at the moment. Let's get some advice early on in the piece. So there's the lesson of getting there early, but there is also the secondary lesson of saying, well, the outcome is not necessarily, okay, we're coming to deal with Darren. That means that the business is going under and we're going to have a whole lot of troubles as a result of admitting to this. Like, it is possible to turn this thing around.
Yeah. I had one scenario before Christmas where a business owner came in. It was a micro business. They ran a little cafe, weren't making enough money to cover all the costs. One of the major issues is that the business was employing too many staff, and the director probably needed to spend more time in the business, working the business themselves. And she was pretty much done, because she'd been doing this for quite some time leading into coming to see me. Now, this wasn't a business that I could sell as a going concern from a liquidation. And the concern was the director's personal exposure for the property lease and some leased equipment that was integral to be used within the business. So instead of looking at a restructure plan, and instead of just simply appointing me as a liquidator straight away, I referred her to a business broker to have a look at trying to sell the business as a going concern. Now, even if that business was sold for $1, what could go with the sale of that business was the old lease being ripped up and a new lease being entered with the new purchaser. Same with the equipment, which was integral to the business. Now, just that as a scenario didn't add any value to getting money back to the creditors, because even if I had have been appointed, it would have been the same outcome. But what it enabled was some personal liabilities of the director to be extinguished as part of a sale process. And if the company goes into liquidation, what the benefit is that the landlord and these rental companies would not be creditors of the company once liquidated. So the creditor pool reduces. So that's another type of scenario where it's a better outcome for the stakeholders as a whole, being the leasing creditors as well as the director for their personal exposure, as opposed to the other creditors generally who were or would have been no worse position when the liquidation actually occurs.
So then the next question comes, which follows on from just what you were saying there, is what would you like the outcome to be? Is there a knee-jerk reaction versus considered reaction to that question?
There's probably, I wouldn't say a knee-jerk reaction, but there's the optimistic reaction, getting back to optimism versus reality. So there's probably more the optimistic reaction. But then when we talk it through and start to work through what would be required to achieve the outcome in the ideal world, that's when reality does sink in and we really determine whether reality can be achievable.
Yeah. And what do you see more often than not? Do people want the business to continue, or is there that resignation of, you know what, let's just find a way to get out?
Oh, look, every matter is different given the circumstances. I'd say on par, it's probably a 50-50. A lot of people would like to think that they could continue on and restructure. Whether they can achieve that given everything else in the universe that's going on comes down to what's happening in the moment and their individual circumstances. But I'd say on par from that very initial question, it's probably a 50-50 when speaking with small business owners.
So then we come to the all important part, which is the plan to deliver whatever that decision is. And particularly it's for the business to continue. They want to restructure, they want to do those things. How hard is it for people to take that, A, that reality check, B, that step back a little bit and say, I've built a business to a certain point. Do they have the answers as to what they really know they should be doing when they start removing some of the emotion? Because I imagine there's a lot of emotion, particularly when it comes to staff, where people might be attached to that or even to property.
Yeah, the reality is when we look at the business for one of a restructure or a successful restructure, we really focus on this is what you need to do to achieve success with the process. If that involves a reorganisation of staff, what we find is that business owners become more focused on success. And whilst they might not like making people redundant, and let's be honest, no one does, but business owners generally are more focused on the success of their business and doing what needs to be done to achieve that. And so therefore, they're more likely to make those hard decisions, far more likely than they were before coming to see us.
And what are some of the key things that you sit down and have to look at with in terms of building that plan? Where do you start? What are those factors that they need to look at?
A lot of it's numbers based. It comes down to what is your break even? What are your costs? What is your break even? Is there enough revenue to meet break even? If there isn't enough revenue to meet break even, what costs can we cut out to reduce the break even level to meet the revenue that we're currently achieving? So a lot of work is done around the break even level and the restructure of costs or the cost reconstruction to determine if we've got a viable business going forward.
And how much also comes down to looking at, has the market shifted? Is there actually a market there? Do I need to shift what the business is actually doing? It was delivering this before, but actually now the market really wants that. Does that come into the factor, or is that a bridge too far when people are at this kind of point?
No, look, it does, because we look at the historical sales and we say if there has been a decline in the sales, well, then we look at why. And is the why a cyclical issue? Is the why a product issue? Is it a temporary or systemic issue? What is going on? And can we address or stabilise or swing those sales back to a positive upward trend? And generally, when you start going through, the last 12, 18 months with the directors and the salespeople involved, you tend to flesh out the reasons as to why there's been a dip, so you can then start to correct it.
And Darren, just to wrap things up here, any stories you want to share about some positive outcomes? Because I think it's always important to give people that sense that there are some really positives that can come out of this process, because that mapping out that plan and being able to go, I can do this, and then seeing that it is being done. And how long are you involved once that plan is getting to a certain point? Like, at what point do you go, right, this is okay, we're ready to step away now?
Sure. And you talk about positive outcomes. A positive outcome for a director can in fact be the closure of the business, realise the assets, and the director simply go out and get a PAYG job, because quite often they find when that happens, the money that they bring into the family unit that they're earning is 9 times out of 10 more than they were earning from their failing business, right? So when you talk about positive outcomes, that to me is a positive outcome, because the director is providing for the family unit, which is what it's all about at the end of the day. When we talk about a restructure of the business and the positive outcomes there, I'm structural, I'm not operational. We can provide the structure to enable the business to turn around. It's up to the directors to implement that turnaround and monitor the ongoing operations of the business to ensure that they're profitable. Well, ensure they're breaking even at worst, at best that they're profitable and hitting the realistic targets that have been put in place. And if they're hitting optimistic targets, well, then it's a win-win, right? And the process that we go through provides the directors with the opportunity, for want of a better term, second chance, for the opportunity to learn from the past, set up for the future, and attempt to achieve the success that they've been looking for. So, that is the positive that comes out of what we do.
Fantastic. And that's all we have time for in this episode. Next time on IO Insolvency Options, we'll continue exploring critical topics that every business owner and director needs to understand. Darren will share more insights from his 30 years of experience helping businesses navigate financial challenges and find practical solutions. Make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss it. For details on how to get in touch with Darren and his team on insolvency challenges, please consult the show notes. This podcast is produced by my team at podcastdoneforyou.com.au, helping professionals share their expertise through powerful podcast content. If you found value in today's episode, please like, comment, and subscribe to IO Insolvency Options. Until next time, remember, there's always a way forward when you know your options.